And we all have the opportunity of living it to the fullest. Unfortunately, so few of us know how to manage it all. How do we account for our opportunities? How do we account for our time? How do we account for our relationships, health, spirituality, homes, finances, influence, and careers? How do we account for the one life we have to live? I am so glad you asked. In this program, you will find answers to all of these questions and more. Welcome to the Account for Your Life podcast with your host, the healthy accountant himself, Jay Moore.
Happy Sunday and welcome back to another episode of the Account for Life podcast. Today, here's what we're talking about: why it's so hard to stay consistent. Why it's so hard to stay consistent. Wow, man, let's jump right into it, man, because I think many of us may have had some issues with consistency in something at some point, because there's no person on the planet that's consistent in everything. However, we got to choose what consistent means to us and for the things that we do. So I looked up the word consistent just to kind of, make sure I'm talking about it in the right context. And consistent could mean someone who always behaves in the same way, has the same attitudes towards people or things, achieves the same level of success in something. Let's see, what else did they say about consistent? Acting or something done in the same way over time, especially so as to be accurate, unchanging in nature, standard, or effect over time, in agreement with something. I think I like that one the best. Consistent is when we are in agreement with something. So, why is it so hard to stay in agreement with something? Let's add something. With something we ultimately desire. Why is it so hard to stay consistent? Why is it so hard to act the same way? All right. Yeah, I'm thinking about this, right? And I'm thinking about my own journey here and kind of like how I've been in my life. And, I know that I've been very consistent, going to the gym and focusing in on my health and just kind of, making sure that I'm always on track there. And then there's other areas in my life where I'm not as consistent. And sometimes you wonder, well, why am I not as consistent? And I realize why. You ready? Why it's so hard. This is number one. You don't have a system for doing it. Period. Not consistent because we don't have a system. It's kind of like, in our business, if something hasn't been systematized, what happens is you wind up just kind of haphazardly doing it. And it's like something that comes up. It comes up today, and then realize I really should systematize this, but you don't. Then it comes up again, and I should systematize it. Then it comes up again, and then what happens is we won't get the same results because we haven't said this is how we're going to do it. So one of the biggest reasons that it's hard to be consistent is that we don't have a system of doing it because we're not in agreement. Wow. That's like I'm sitting there having a light bulb moment, like being in agreement. Man, if I'm in agreement with what I said I desired, then being consistent in doing it is not going to be a problem. We can look at this in a plethora of ways. And so we can look at it as, okay, I don't have a system. I want to do something. I want to lose weight. I want to make more money. I want to start a business. I want to get married. I want my marriage to get better. I want my kids to do a certain thing. Whatever it is, like I want to do something, but yet I don't have a system for doing it. So without a system for doing it, man, I'm like this is preaching to me, to me on a lot of levels, because if I'm looking at my results, consistency brings results. It says that when you do something the same way, there's going to be an outcome. Consistency brings an outcome. And when there's an outcome, then you say, wow, all I had to do was 1, 2, 3, and I get the outcome. So when we are in agreement, but let's come back to the question, why is it so hard? The agreement is hard. What's an agreement? Let's think about it. Agreement is a contract. let's just say what that is. Agreement is a contract. And back in the early days, contracts were called covenants. A covenant means that you sealed it in blood. Meaning, if you and I had a covenant with each other, we would have to cut ourselves. If we had a covenant with each other, we would have to cut ourselves and then allow our hands to touch. We both got to cut. We grasp hands, and we say that, look, if we don't keep this covenant, and that blood is real, so it's hard to be consistent because we don't have a system, and we won't go in agreement with what it is that we want, which means that we don't want to contract with ourselves, which means that if we don't want to contract with ourselves, it means it's saying, why even say you want something? What's the purpose of even saying I desire something? Good morning, Deanna. How are you? So if I say I would like to be consistent in my business, well, here's how I'm going to have to define that. I'm going to have to say, well, there are many things to do in the business, Jay. Right? So if there's many things to do, then I got to figure out, well, what am I going to do in the business? Now, if I'm talking about business is interesting because business has a plethora of things to do in it. And so here's a modern approach of looking at business, all the areas. You've got content first, marketing second, sales third, customer support fourth, and then operations. Check this out. Do you know most entrepreneurs hang out in operations? I'm not going to entrepreneurs. Most people who start businesses, we hang out in operations, and then we don't realize that there's these 4 other areas. If we got to systematize those 4 other areas so that when we systematize operations, we get the things that we want. So it's hard to be consistent in business because there's a lot of things to do. So because there's a lot of things to do, a lot of times we're looking at it like, wow, that's a lot of stuff. So how does one in business get consistent even though there's a lot of things to do? First thing you do is you decide. Oh my goodness, the decision is everything. I'm going to decide to be consistent in the things that I can do. So Jay, so you're telling me that, well, what about the content? What about the marketing? Well, you got to decide what you can do. Because if you try and do it all, I guarantee we're going to fall on our faces. So we got to first decide what we can do and then focus on that. See, what's happened is that many of us have been, misguided in some regard. I'm not saying fully, but misguided in some regard to think that we can do everything in the business, and you can't. It's not possible. You can't do everything. So if we know we can't do everything, I'm not saying you shouldn't have an awareness. We should have an awareness of everything. I should have an awareness of the right content. I should have an awareness of what marketing is for my business. I should have an awareness of how to sell the service or the product. I should have an awareness of what customer support looks like. I should have an awareness of what operations looks like. Now, here's the thing. I'm not able to do all those things. So what can I get consistent at? What do I already know how to do? And then I get consistent at that. Create some systems around that. Check this out. And then because I have systems around it, I could place somebody else in there. What? Are you serious? I could do that. Yeah, because you have a system around it. So now because of the consistency that you started with, now you can place someone else, show them the system. Listen, McDonald's does this. Burger King does this. All the fast food chains do this. They have a system and they drop teenagers in and say, here, go ahead. You can do that job. Here's how to do it. Here's the system. Do not deviate from the system. And no one deviates from the system. Chick-fil-A, no one, like my son works at Chick-fil-A, no one deviates from the system. They all get trained on just about everything in the store. So some days you come in, you're working the drive-through. Some days you come in, you're working the register on the inside. Some days you come in, you're fulfilling, you're putting the stuff in the bag. Some day you come in, you're doing milkshakes and drinks. Some days you come in, now most people aren't working in the kitchen because only certain people are going to go in the kitchen. But some days you come in, you're making iced tea and you're making lemonades and, you do like some days but everybody knows the jobs. Because there's a system. So the person who created the business knew that they weren't going to do all the stuff. They said, well, let me just create some systems and then drop people in. But let's come back to the question. Why is it so hard to be consistent? It's the covenant. It's the contract. It's the agreement that we have to make with ourselves. And if we don't make the agreement with ourselves, then we can't get consistent at it, which means we won't get the results we want, which means that we'll wonder at some point in our life, well, why didn't that happen a certain way? Why haven't things gone the way that I ultimately desire? Because we wouldn't uphold the contract, the agreement with me. We wouldn't, just say it, I wouldn't do it with me. So if I don't do it with me, then that means no one else is going to do it with you, because we're not consistent. I'm going to tell you, man, this is somebody close in about 2 minutes. The thing about this consistency that I'm learning is that it's so multifaceted, but it's so simple and it's so easy. Let me say it again. It's simple and easy. How is it easy? So last week, I think I shared, it was last week I shared on how to account for your life and the framework that Account for Your Life is built on. It's built on the declare easy framework, which is you declare, which at the declaration point, we're actually creating a contract with ourselves, because we're declaring it because we've already made a decision that this has to happen. So I'm going to declare that this is going to happen. And as it's going to happen, I'm going to, if it's something that I need to learn, if it's something that I need to really understand, especially with this consistency, learning how to systematize, then I got to get educated. I got to educate myself. I got to apply all the education, and I got to create systems around it. And as the systems are developing, I'm focused on the one thing that matters the most, which is you. You are focused on the one thing that matters the most. Look, at the end of the day, this is why God said there's only 2 commandments. Jesus said this. Jesus says that if you love God with all your heart and all your mind, and if you love yourself, love your neighbor as yourself, you are fulfilling the law. What? So even God said you have to be more into you, because if you're not more into you, you can't help anybody else. That's why we got to get consistent. So even though it may seem hard to stay consistent, if we declare easy, and when we come into agreement, creating a contract with ourselves, the consistency that we ultimately desire, it'll be ours. And the results that we'll get on the back end is going to be everything and even more than we ever could imagine. Because here's what the prophet Paul said. He says, God can do far more than you can ask or imagine through the power which worketh in you. In you. See, you see how this works? Everything is about you and God. So guys, it's not hard, but it's hard because, look, at the end of the day, if we focus on the things that are hard, our life, everything will be easy. Guys, I appreciate you for joining me for this episode of the Account for Life podcast. This is Jay Moore, the Healthy Accountant, helping you to account for life. God bless, and I'll see you on the next episode. Peace.
Thanks for joining us, listening friends. We are so glad you invested this time with us. Always remember, you only have one life to live. So live it to the fullest. This has been the Account for Your Life podcast with your host, the healthy accountant himself, Jay Moore. Until next time, make it a great day.